If they want to be convinced they're brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me.
I'm prepared. I'm all right. I'm all right with it.
I wish that I could take every bit of hurt on myself.
They can't hurt me no more.
So what do you do in your cell all those years?
Number 14, John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was a notorious American serial slayer who preyed upon young boys and young men between 1972 and 1978, shocking the U.S. Gacy's crimes came to light in December 1978 when a young man, Robert Peast, disappeared after a job interview with Gacy. Suspicion quickly fell on Gacy due to his criminal record and reports of suspicious activities at his home. A subsequent search of his property revealed horrifying evidence: the remains of numerous victims buried in and around his home.
If they want to be convinced they're brainwashed into what they believe, then fine, then go ahead and kill me. Image that I was this monster who picked up like these altar boys along the street and swatted them like flies. Powers of truth serum. And under sodium amytal, the maximum amount that I could have, looked after my children even now.
What kind of values do you remember imparting to them?
The trial of John Wayne Gacy began in February 1980, attracting significant media attention and public interest. The prosecution built a strong case against Gacy, presenting evidence that included the recovered victims' bodies and testimonies from survivors who had escaped Gacy's clutches. Gacy's defense team attempted to argue diminished capacity and insanity, but their efforts were largely unsuccessful. On March 13, 1980, Gacy was found guilty of multiple counts of slaying and sentenced to his demise. The jury's decision reflected the gravity of the crimes and the overwhelming evidence against him. Gacy's conviction and subsequent sentencing brought a sense of relief and closure to the victims' families, who had endured unimaginable pain and loss. However, Gacy's journey through the legal system did not end there. Over the following years, he filed multiple appeals, further prolonging the anguish experienced by the victims' families. Gacy's fatal punishment finally took place on May 10, 1994, through lethal injection. His last words were, "Kiss my ass." Gacy's demise marked the end of a dark chapter in American criminal history. Number 13, Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos, one of the most infamous female serial slayers in American history, committed a series of slayings that no one saw coming. Wuornos' slaying spree began in 1989 and lasted until her arrest in 1991. She targeted and took down several men, predominantly those who she claimed had attacked or threatened her. Wuornos' troubled upbringing, marked by abandonment, exploitation, and a life on the streets, played a significant role in shaping her psyche and ultimately contributing to her violent acts. During her trial in 1992, Wuornos' defense team argued that her actions were a response to the traumatic experiences she had endured, including physical exploitation and neglect. They contended that her troubled mental state, combined with a history of harm and abandonment, led her to lash out in a desperate attempt to protect herself. Despite these claims, the prosecution presented evidence suggesting that Wuornos' crimes were not solely motivated by self-defense, but rather driven by a desire for financial gain. Wuornos' trial was a media spectacle, with intense public interest surrounding her case due to the rarity of a female serial slayer. The trial raised important questions about gender bias within the criminal justice system, as her actions defied societal expectations of women. Some argued that Wuornos' portrayal in the media as a cold-blooded monster was influenced by gender stereotypes, while others maintained that the severity of her crimes warranted the utmost punishment. In January 1992, Wuornos was found guilty of multiple counts of first-degree slaying and was sentenced to the capital punishment. Over the years, Wuornos' mental state deteriorated further and she became increasingly isolated. She maintained that her actions were acts of self-defense and refused to accept responsibility for the slayings. Despite multiple appeals, her sentence was upheld. On October 9, 2002, Eileen Wuornos was put down by lethal injection. Her last words were, "I just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock and I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus, June 6th, like the movie Big Mothership and all," showing just how mentally unstable she was at the time of her demise.
I'm prepared. I'm all right. I'm all right with it. And they covered it up. and let me kill the rest of those guys to turn me into a serial killer. When I had 3 meetings with Miss Villacorta on it.
Right.
Running into trouble, I shoot the guy if I ran into trouble. We're gonna have to cut this interview, Nick. And that was covered up.
Number 12, Nico Allen Jenkins. Nico Jenkins, a disturbed individual with a troubled past, committed a series of brutal slayings in 2013 that shook the community of Omaha, Nebraska. Jenkins' crime spree began shortly after his release from prison, where he had served time for prior offenses. Driven by a delusional belief in Egyptian mythology and his desire to appease ancient spirits, Jenkins embarked on a slaying spree that claimed the lives of 4 innocent victims. The slayings were characterized by extreme violence and a lack of remorse, leaving the community in a state of shock and fear. During his trial in 2014, Jenkins' mental state became a central focus. His defense argued that he suffered from severe mental illness, including schizophrenia and personality disorders, which impaired his ability to understand the consequences of his actions. They claimed that Jenkins' distorted beliefs and voices in his head influenced his behavior, leading to the tragic outcome. The trial was full of controversy and challenges. Jenkins repeatedly disrupted court proceedings, engaging in bizarre and unpredictable behavior. His outbursts and claims of mistreatment further complicated the legal proceedings, calling into question his competence to stand trial. Despite these challenges, the court found Jenkins competent to proceed, and he was ultimately found guilty on multiple counts of slaying. The punishment phase of Jenkins' trial presented a complex dilemma. Should a possibly mentally ill individual be sentenced fatally? Or is he faking it to escape his punishment? In the end, the prosecution argued for the capital penalty, emphasizing the heinous nature of the crimes and the need for justice to be served. In 2017, Jenkins was sentenced to perish by lethal injection. He is currently waiting for his punishment on the row.
Was for hearsay, not hearsay, but to say Black Book. So this was them, my little cousins, the one that were in the house with me. That when I got this is the real deal right here, which you signed up for.
Okay. Before we get any further, though, I need to read you this right.
Describe the weapon. Yes, it's a high point, but it shoots 9mm slugs. And if you was to see this weapon, you would not believe it. Like I said, I didn't know who was coming, what was coming, who was it going to be used on. All I did was give the intelligence to take in. If you're going to do something way out west, they have cameras on the lights. As you know, it's black at nighttime. You realize that, right? So if you're coming from that crime scene, you can hit it. That's off right off the interstate. Ain't that Walmart right off the interstate? Off of Military Ave?
Yeah.
So my...
You all right?
You all right, man? You all right, man? You listen to me. Because like what you said, if you don't tell me what the heck happened out there, worst. Hey, if this a robbery went bad, if there's something happened... I got Nico Jenkins. Do you not realize that? I got your DNA at the murder scene. I got your DNA in the car. I don't care about it. I just want other people that are involved in it. What the hell happened out there? And why?
Number 11, Billy Wayne Coble. Billy Wayne Coble, a Vietnam War veteran and electrician, was convicted in 1990 of slaying his estranged wife's mother and father, Robert and Zelda Vicha, and her brother John Bobby Vicha, who was a police sergeant. Coble's wife had sought a divorce at the time. He ambushed the 3 victims and shot them at their home in Axtell, a small community 100 miles north of the state capital, Austin. The slayer then kidnapped his estranged wife and drove off with her. He was chased by police and, while driving, knifed her with a knife. Coble eventually crashed into a parked car and was arrested. His wife survived. For this gruesome crime, Coble was arrested and jailed in 1990. He was sentenced to the row in the same year.
Are you frightened about next week?
Well, death is death. A person said, well, do you tell me what a good way is to die? I have known probably about 400 people that lived the easier days to accept death. Who is not going to leave this world?
And you know those 2 facts.
Desire to give it any thought. I mean, why do you speak it? Because it's the truth.
What happened?
You say,
what happened?
You say, I've accepted that I'm here for those murders, yes.
But then in 2007, the fatal sentence was overturned and Coble was granted a new trial. But the following year, the jury once again sentenced him to his demise. The Supreme Court denied Coble's application for a stay before his punishment in 2019, which was fair since he never showed any remorse for the slayings and had been described as having a heart full of scorpions. Coble was pronounced deceased on February 28 at 6:24 p.m. from lethal injection at the State Chamber in Huntsville, Texas. The slayer chose very bizarre last words before he was put down, saying, "That will be $5, take care." Number 10, Scott Dozier. Scott Dozier slayed 2 men, severing the head off one victim, which was believed to have been buried in concrete in Nevada. The 48-year-old left an eerie last message before he took his own life in Ely State Prison, Nevada on January 6, 2019, having been scheduled to be punished in the new $860,000 fatal chamber later that year. On April 18, 2002, Dozier met Jeremiah Miller at La Concha Motel on the Las Vegas Strip. Dozier promised to help Miller buy ephedrine, which is a key ingredient in making meth. Miller had brought $12,000 in cash for the purchase, but as Miller arrived at La Concha, Dozier took him down. During a police investigation, it was uncovered that Dozier had gone on a spending spree after allegedly stealing Miller's $12,000, telling friends he'd won it at a casino. He was also tied to the slaying of Jason Griffin Green on July 27, 2001. Green's decomposed remains were found in the desert north of Phoenix, Arizona. Dozier allegedly shot Green at a trailer in Carefree, Arizona, after a confrontation in which Green threatened to expose Dozier's meth operation. Green's slaying was reported by a former drug associate of Dozier, Doug Powell, who confessed he and another man had helped Dozier dispose of Green's remains. In 2005, Dozier was handed a 22-year sentence for the slaying of Green. After being extradited to Nevada, he then stood trial for Miller's slaying in September 2007. For this, he was handed the capital punishment on October 3, 2007, and was waiting to be put down, but it seems he could wait no longer. He left a recorded message before he took his life. He rambled about how the system was unfair and how he didn't want to be put down using dubious drugs, further emphasizing that he wasn't allowed to meet his 2-year-old granddaughter and would rather perish than be remembered by her as a man in jail. His chilling last words were, "Let's get it done." Number 9, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy, one of the most notorious serial slayers in American history, perpetrated a string of gruesome slayings that spanned several states in the USA during the 1970s. Bundy's crime spree began in the early 1970s, targeting young women whom he lured with his charm and manipulative tactics. His modus operandi often involved pretending to be injured or in need of assistance to gain the trust of his victims. Once he had them in a vulnerable position, he would overpower and ultimately slay them in brutal fashion. As the number of missing women increased across several states, Bundy became the focus of a nationwide manhunt. His ability to elude capture for an extended period added to the mystique surrounding his crimes and fueled public fear and fascination. Bundy's capture in 1978 marked a turning point in his story.
Ted, it is about 2:30 in the afternoon. What is going through your mind? What thoughts have you had in these last few days?
Feel that I am in control of, or something that I've come to terms with, because I haven't. It's a moment. What's going through my mind right now is to use. It helps to live in the moment, in the essence that we use it productively. So I'm right. Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's true.
Ted, how did it happen? Take me back. Did this moment come about?
That's the question of the hour, working on for years, but one that I've been working on for years and trying to understand it though, understand what happened to me, to the extent that I act out on them, certain very violent and very destructive feelings.
All right, let's go back then to those roots. You were not physically abused, you were not sexually abused, you were not emotionally abused.
No, in no way. Grew up in a wonderful home with 2 dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers. My parents' lives, where we regularly attended church, 2 Christian parents who did not drink, they did not smoke. This because I know, and I'm trying to tell you as honestly as I know how, what happened.
He was initially arrested for driving a stolen vehicle and had been linked to the crimes through evidence found in his possession. Subsequent investigations and eyewitness testimonies tied him to multiple slayings, leading to his trial in 1979. The trial became a media spectacle, attracting widespread attention due to the shocking nature of the crimes and Bundy's charismatic persona. His courtroom antics and attempts to represent himself added to the drama. However, despite his efforts, Bundy was found guilty on multiple counts of slaying. During the sentencing phase, Bundy's defense team attempted to paint him as a victim of traumatic childhood experiences and mental illness. They argued for leniency, suggesting that he could be rehabilitated. However, the prosecution vehemently opposed these claims, emphasizing the severity of the crimes and the need for the ultimate punishment. Bundy's punishment arrived on January 24, 1989, when he was fatally punished in the electric chair. His last words were, "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." Number 8. Margie Velma Barfield. Margie Velma Barfield, an infamous figure in criminal history, was convicted of multiple slayings and became the first woman to be put down by lethal injection in the U.S. Born on October 29, 1932 in South Carolina, Barfield had a troubled past that paved the way for her criminal activities. She struggled with drug addiction, particularly a dependence on prescription drugs. In the early 1970s, Barfield's life took a dark turn when she turned to theft and slaying to fuel her addiction. Barfield's crimes began to unravel in 1978 when she was arrested for the slaying of her employer, Stuart Taylor. It was discovered that she had been poisoning Taylor with arsenic-laced medications over a period of time, ultimately causing his demise. This initial arrest opened a Pandora's box of chilling revelations as authorities began to investigate further. Barfield soon confessed to several other slayings, targeting individuals close to her, including her mother, Lillian Bullard, and 2 elderly acquaintances. She admitted to poisoning them with arsenic, motivated by financial gain and the desire to support her drug habit. During her trial in 1979, Barfield's defense team argued that her actions were a result of her addiction and psychological distress. They sought to portray her as a victim of circumstances, pleading for leniency. However, the prosecution presented a strong case against her, supported by her own confessions and damning evidence. Barfield was found guilty of multiple counts of slaying and was sentenced to capital punishment. Despite her personal and religious transformation, Barfield's punishment date approached fast. On November 2, 1984, she became the first woman to be put down by lethal injection in the United States. She released a statement before her punishment. "I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry, and I want to thank everybody who have been supporting me all these 6 years." Barfield chose as her last meal cheese doodles and Coca-Cola.
Of not knowing where you are or what you've done, I wish that I could take every bit of hurt on myself.
She also admitted poisoning 3 other people, including her mother.
For the hurt that I've caused so many people. Years of a drug nightmare. Body that I had been with for almost 6 years.
Number 7. Wanda Jean Allen. Wanda Jean Allen's crime, trial, and subsequent punishment provide a tragic and controversial chapter in the history of the criminal justice system. Born on August 17, 1959 in Oklahoma, Wanda Jean Allen faced numerous challenges throughout her life, including a troubled upbringing and a history of mental illness. On December 29, 1981, Allen committed a heinous act that would forever alter the lives of those involved. During an argument with her girlfriend, Gloria Jean Leathers, Allen fatally shot her. Allen's trial in 1989 garnered significant attention due to the intersection of her mental health issues and the potential racial bias in the application of the penalty. Allen's defense argued that she suffered from diminished mental capacity at the time of the crime, raising questions about her competency and ability to fully comprehend her actions. Despite these arguments, Allen was convicted of first-degree slaying and sentenced to capital punishment. This ignited discussions about the fairness of capital punishment, particularly when applied to individuals with mental health challenges. Advocates argued that executing someone with diminished mental capacity violated constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment. Allen's case gained further traction as her lawyers argued for clemency based on her mental health and the potential for rehabilitation. Advocacy groups, included those focused on mental health and civil rights, rallied behind Allen, highlighting the inherent biases and systemic flaws within the criminal justice system. However, despite these efforts, Allen's punishment date drew near. On January 11, 2001, she became the first African-American woman to be put down in the U.S. since reinstatement of the capital penalty in the 1970s. During her punishment, Allen was still alert, listening to the prison chaplain as he read scripture. A few seconds later, she looked at her audience, playfully stuck out her tongue, and winked. Her attorney mouthed, "I love you," to her, and she said aloud, "Bet that." Those were the last words ever spoken by Allen.
Do you believe that God can save you?
Yes, daughter should be here with them today for the holidays. Both our families are missing us.
Dear Lord, give one to Jean Allen the words to say, the words that you want her
To forgive others in order to be forgiven, and for him to guide and direct my life.
Your sentence first, and then I'll give plenty of time for you.
And had pistol whipped her before shooting her in the head. Still, Wanda Jean Allen pled guilty. One police expert concluded that Pettis's bruises and powder burns proved that Allen...
12 years has brought a lot of people together.
People talk about finding faith in prison. I can do it.
Number 6. Robert Fratta. Robert Fratta's case is a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity and the pursuit of justice. On November 9, 1994, in Fort Bend County, Texas, Farrah Fratta, the wife of Robert, was brutally slain in a carefully orchestrated plot. Fratta conspired with his mistress, Patricia Blackman, and Joseph Pristash to carry out the crime. Pristash acted as the gunman, fatally shooting Farrah outside her home. The motive behind the slaying was believed to be Robert's desire to rid himself of his wife and gain custody of their children.
Justice has prevailed. Freedom has prevailed. The young girl, she still asks for her mother. Mommy, I love you, Mommy. I miss you. That's a lot of torture. That's a hell of a lot of torture.
I cannot wait for the day when I see him laying on that table, waiting to get the injection.
We'll have only two choices, either life in prison or death by injection.
The subsequent trial shed light on the sinister nature of the crime. Witnesses and evidence presented by the prosecution painted a damning picture of Fratta's involvement. Blackman, who had turned against Fratta, testified against him, detailing their affair and the plot to slay Farrah. Key pieces of evidence, including phone records and surveillance footage, further corroborated the prosecution's case. In 1996, Fratta was found guilty of capital slaying and sentenced to capital punishment. The jury's decision reflected the heinousness of the crime and the calculated nature of Fratta's involvement. Fratta's subsequent appeals focused on challenging the validity of his conviction and the fairness of the trial. His defense argued that the evidence against him was circumstantial and insufficient to warrant a guilty verdict. However, these appeals were largely unsuccessful, and Fratta's sentence remained in place. Fratta's punishment was initially scheduled for 2003, but was delayed due to legal challenges. However, on January 29, 2014, after nearly 2 decades of appeals and legal proceedings, Robert Fratta was put down by lethal injection. He offered no final words before his punishment. His demise finally brought closure to a tragic chapter in the lives of Farrah's family.
Can you describe your wife Farrah in the best moments you had?
Very attracted to her physically, but she was just, she treated me wonderfully. And I felt that as she was coming over to my apartment and she'd want to cook for me, clean for me, do my clothes for me, I grew to love her and fall in love with her for the personality that she was. But she wasn't she was only like 5'4" and about 116 pounds when we met. Well, I always so my children wouldn't grow up like me, being small and picked on. So no, she didn't meet the physical attributes of.
And you were very much into your, in your appearance. You wanted to look beautiful in life.
Oh, well, thanks. But I guess it was more insecurity. It was because I was always short and skinny. I got out of the bodybuilding competing very quickly because it was just, I got to the point where realizing working out aspect of things.
But you were always very well groomed.
Number 5. James Barnes. James Barnes is a convicted and self-confessed serial slayer who was sentenced to the capital punishment in Florida for the 1988 slaying of Patricia Patsy Miller, a 41-year-old nurse. Her slaying went unsolved until 2005, when Barnes, who was serving a life sentence for the 1997 slaying of his wife, confessed to the crime. Barnes confessed after converting to Islam, claiming he wanted to clear his conscience. For the Miller slaying, he was sentenced to his demise and is scheduled to be put down on August 3, 2023. On April 20, 1988, Barnes broke into the home of Patricia Patsy Miller, a 41-year-old nurse, in Melbourne, Florida. He broke into Miller's home through a bedroom window and confronted her at knife point before physically exploiting her. Afterward, he attacked her with a hammer, then bound her with his shoelaces while she was lying face down on the bed. After bludgeoning her with a hammer, Barnes set her bed on fire in an attempt to conceal the crime and fled the area. A medical examiner later determined that Miller had perished from blunt force trauma to the head and had been slain prior to the starting of the fire. According to investigators, Barnes did not know Miller, and her slaying went unsolved. On December 11, 1997, Barnes strangled his estranged wife, 44-year-old Linda Barnes, at her home in West Melbourne. On December 2, Barnes had been given a restraining order against Linda that prohibited him from going near her or her home. After slaying his wife, Barnes stuffed her body in a closet and remained at the house. On December 12, sheriff's deputies arrested Barnes at the house, and he was charged with Linda's slaying. In 2010, Barnes was interviewed at Florida State Prison by German filmmaker Werner Herzog as part of his television series. 6 weeks after his interview, Barnes sent a letter to Herzog confessing to the unsolved slaying of Chester Wetmore and Brenda Fletcher. According to Barnes, he has a list of things he wants to accomplish before he perishes, one of which is to resolve all the unresolved crimes he has ever committed. Barnes claimed he first came across Wetmore in 1988, describing him as a runaway hooked on crystal meth and crack cocaine. Wetmore had been on the streets for a long time and was making money as a body worker. He had been listed as a missing person since May 27, 1986. Barnes claimed Wetmore broke into his car and stole his belongings. Barnes went after him and slayed him by fatally shooting him with a shotgun. The slaying occurred in 1988. He and 2 accomplices then buried his body. According to Barnes, Fletcher was a body worker without a family who was a crack cocaine addict. He accused her of stealing his wallet, and he wanted his driver's license back. Fletcher denied the allegation, and Barnes then took her life. The slaying occurred in 1991. Because of his heinous crimes, Barnes now waits on the row for his fatal punishment.
Mr. Barnes, you should know that sympathizing with your quest to have procedural. However, I really am intrigued by the question about we not being on death row.
Yes.
That is a very specific situation.
It's a great reflection. It's hard for an individual to concentrate on, it would be like, oh, you have, a time to repent with a definite end date. It comes with a lot of anxiety. It comes with the thoughts of, work as well as they plan it. There was an inmate that was executed here named Diaz a couple of years ago. Threw his veins into his muscle and burned him up. And was what's happening, it burns, it burns. So there's kind of part about that. Press the red button when it burns to let them know that it's not working right. It doesn't seem like anybody has discretionary authority to make things, this is, the death protocol, and we're going to follow this to the letter of the law. Whether 2 barriers, 2 walkways, hallways, as you would, with bars separating them. Yes. If I look down at the end, I can see through a window that's about 15 feet away, and I can see some green something. And of course, every once in a while, a bird will nest for a few days.
Number 4, Oscar Ray Bolin Jr. Oscar Ray Bolin Jr., a notorious figure in criminal history, was convicted for a series of brutal slayings that terrorized Florida in the 1980s. Beginning in 1986, Bolin embarked on a slaying spree, targeting young women in the Tampa Bay area. His victims included Stephanie Collins, Natalie Hawley, and Terry Lynn Matthews. The slayings were marked by extreme violence, with the victims being abducted, physically exploited, and ultimately slain. The chilling nature of these crimes left the community in a state of fear and unease. Boland's crimes remained unsolved until 1990, when new evidence came to light, leading to his arrest and subsequent trial. The trial, which began in 1992, captivated the media and the public's attention due to the heinous nature of the crimes and the potential for the capital penalty. During the trial, Boland vehemently denied his involvement in the incidents, claiming that he was being framed by law enforcement. The prosecution presented compelling evidence, including eyewitness testimony, DNA evidence, and Boland's own contradictory statements, linking him to the crimes. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty on multiple counts of first-degree slaying. The penalty phase of Boland's trial was equally intense. The prosecution argued for the capital penalty, citing the extreme cruelty of the crimes and the need for justice. The defense, on the other hand, presented mitigating factors such as Boland's troubled childhood and alleged mental health issues. The jury, however, recommended capital punishment, and Boland was sentenced fatally. Over the following decades, Boland's case underwent numerous appeals, adding to the anguish and prolonged grief experienced by the victims' families. Boland's defense team fought tenaciously to overturn the conviction, raising concerns about the fairness of the trial and potential errors in the legal proceedings. In 2016, Boland's punishment date finally arrived, and he was actually interviewed on the day before his punishment. When talking about his upcoming punishment, Boland continued to claim he was innocent and had been framed, and described being put down as a release from his punishment, having been locked up in prison for the last 28 years. Boland was punished by lethal injection at 10:16 p.m. on January 7, 2016. He was the first person to be put down in the U.S. in 2016. His last meal consisted of a ribeye steak, a baked potato, salad, garlic bread, lemon meringue pie, and Coca-Cola. He declined to make a final statement.
But I was like, after 20, can't hurt me no more.
So what do you do in your cell all those years?
The works of art of the philosophers, Nietzsche, limited to what you can do. Reading's pretty much the only thing. Reading, writing.
What do you watch? Anything in politics that's interesting to you?
Mostly watch the PBS show, The Master of Peace Mysteries and stuff like that. I didn't watch a lot of the mainstream TV for the kids. I didn't draw for nobody else. I did for her. Too late for me. It was too late for me 28 years ago. I came to prison 28 years ago.
Number 3, Ricardo Ramirez. Ricardo Ramirez, dubbed the Night Stalker, was an American serial slayer and offender whose crime spree took place in California between June 1984 and August 1985. He was convicted and sentenced fatally in 1989. Ramirez's childhood is considered an influence on his crimes. Frequently harmed by his father, Ramirez began developing gruesome and macabre interests in his early and mid-teens from his older cousin, who also taught him some of the military skills that he would go on to use during his year-long slaying spree. Ramirez also cultivated a strong interest in Satanism and the occult. By the time he had left his home in Texas and moved to California at the age of 22, he had begun frequently using cocaine. Ramirez would often commit burglaries to support his drug addiction, many of which were later frequently accompanied by slayings, exploits, attempted exploits, and violent attacks. Ramirez's highly publicized home invasion and slaying spree terrorized the residents of Greater Los Angeles and later the San Francisco Bay Area over the course of 14 months. However, his first known slaying occurred as early as April 1984. This crime was not connected to Ramirez, nor was it known to be his doing until 2009. Ramirez used a wide variety of weapons and different methods, including handguns, various types of knives, a machete, a tire iron, and a claw hammer. He punched, pistol-whipped, and strangled many of his victims, both with his hands and, in one instance, a ligature, stomped at least one victim fatally in her sleep, and tortured another victim by shocking her with a live electrical cord. Ramirez also frequently enjoyed degrading and humiliating his victims, especially those who survived his attacks or whom he explicitly decided not to slay by forcing them to profess that they love Satan or telling them to swear on Satan that there were no more valuables left in their homes he had broken into and burglarized. In 1989, Ramirez was convicted of 13 counts of slayings, 5 attempted slayings, 11 physical exploits, and 14 burglaries. The judge who upheld Ramirez's 19 capital sentences remarked that his deeds exhibited cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. Ramirez never expressed any remorse for his crimes. He perished on June 7, 2013, of complications from B-cell lymphoma while awaiting punishment on California's Row. Number 2. Carroll Edward Cole. Carroll Edward Cole was a U.S. serial slayer who was put down in 1985. He was born in Sioux City, Iowa. While his father went to fight in World War II, Cole was taken along by his mother and forced to watch as she entertained men. She would often beat him to scare him into not telling his father. Even when his father returned home, Cole was frequently whipped and beaten by his mother for the most minor infractions, and he grew up with a deep hatred of women. He was also picked on at school for having a girl's name, so he would usually go by his middle name, Eddie. At the age of 10, Cole drowned a friend of the same age in a lake. The boy's demise was regarded as an accident until Cole confessed to it many years later. After scraping through school, Cole became a drifter, doing menial jobs, drinking heavily, and serving frequent prison sentences for crimes such as burglary, vagrancy, arson, and car theft. Cole eventually began acting on his bloody fantasies. He would pick women up in bars, and though many left unharmed the next day, Cole would invariably slay those he perceived as loose, in particular ones who were married, because they reminded him of his despised mother. His first victim as an adult was Essie Buck, whom he'd picked up at a tavern in San Diego, California on May 7, 1971. He strangled her in his car and drove around with her body in the trunk before eventually dumping it. Just 2 weeks later, he took the life of an unidentified woman and buried her in some woods. In July 1973, Cole married barmaid Diana Paschal, who was also an alcoholic. They argued and fought frequently, and Cole regularly went off on his own for days at a time. He would commit slayings while he was away, including one woman he allegedly cannibalized to a degree. By 1980, Cole was married again and living in Las Vegas. Toward the end of the year, he had slain 3 more women. Arrested on suspicion of slaying the final victim, Cole began his confession, claiming that he had slain at least 14 women over the previous 9 years, although he added that there may have been more. He couldn't remember exactly, as he was usually drunk when he committed his crimes. Sentenced to capital punishment, Cole refused to appeal and was put down in Nevada on December 6, 1985. Number 1. Wesley Allen Dodd. Wesley Dodd was a predator who fell through the cracks of an inefficient, overburdened legal system, graduating from relatively harmless acts of exhibitionism to the depths of sadistic child harm and slaying before he was finally caged and condemned. Apparently repentant in captivity, he granted countless interviews and published articles on self-defense for children in the months before he kept his final date with Washington's hangman. His legacy, for all of the belated efforts to do right, consists of ugly memories and pain. A native of Washington State, born July 3, 1961, Dodd was conscious of his attraction to neighborhood boys by age 9, a full 6 years before his parents divorced and cast the family into disarray. By age 14, he had begun to dabble in exhibitionism, flashing other children from his bedroom window until one reported him and the police were called. Dodd got off easy that time, since the witness had not seen his face, and the experience taught him to seek his pleasure secretly. Soon he went from exposing himself to more aggressive actions, fondling and filleting any children who were willing to submit. By the late summer of 1989, Dodd clearly had slaughter on his mind. He was armed with a 6-inch knife on Labor Day, September 4, when he went prowling in Vancouver's David Douglas Park. He set his sights on brothers, 11-year-old Cole Neer and 10-year-old William. Taking the 2 of them home was clearly out of the question, but Dodd bullied them into following him off the beaten track, deeper into some woods, where both boys were bound with shoelaces, physically exploited, and then knifed fatally. He would go on to exploit and slay one more innocent victim, 4-year-old Lee Iselli, before he was finally caught by the FBI. Dodd at first denied involvement, objecting that he loved children, but his mood changed as the night wore on and confessed the crimes in detail, directing police to his stash of manuscripts and photographs. The rest was easy, with Dodd's guilty plea to all charges in January 1990 clearing the way for a capital sentence 6 months later. Dodd resisted all appeals and mounted the gallows at Walla Walla State Prison shortly after midnight on January 5, 1993. Dodd's final words were, "I was asked by somebody, I don't remember who, if there was any way such offenders could be stopped. I said no. I was wrong. I said there was no hope, no peace. There is peace. There is hope. I found both in the Lord Jesus Christ." He was the first American inmate hanged in nearly 3 decades. That's all for today, folks. We'll see you next time.